The basement of Building 1 at Pearl Harbor reeks of sweat, cigarette smoke, and desperation. It's April 18, 1942, and Commander Joseph Rochefort paces between rows of cramped desks where exhausted Navy cryptanalysts hunch over sheets covered in 5-digit number groups. Every man in this room knows they're losing the war. The Japanese naval code JN-25 sits before them like an impenetrable fortress. For 18 months, America's best mathematicians have thrown themselves against this cipher, and for 18 months, they've failed. The numbers mock them. 333 possible code groups, each one representing a word, a phrase, a ship name, or a location. Even if you crack the code groups, they're then disguised by additive tables that change every few weeks. It's a code wrapped inside a cipher, and it's killing American sailors. In the 4 months since Pearl Harbor, Japanese forces have steamrolled across the Pacific. Wake Island, fallen. Guam, fallen. The Philippines on the verge of collapse. American submarines hunt blindly through empty ocean while Japanese carriers strike with surgical precision. The kill ratio is devastating. For every Japanese ship sunk, America loses 3. Admiral Nimitz needs to know where the enemy fleet will strike next, but the intelligence officers can only shrug and point to vast stretches of blue on the map. What Rochefort doesn't know, what nobody in that basement knows on this humid Hawaiian morning, is that the breakthrough they desperately need will come from the most unlikely source imaginable. Not from a Yale mathematician or a Naval Academy graduate. Not from one of the Japanese language experts imported from California universities. The solution will come from a kid who shouldn't even be in the building. A 17-year-old who lied his way into the Navy with a forged birth certificate and a voice that keeps cracking at the worst possible moments. His name is Andrew Mattei Gleason, and in 6 weeks his obsessive tinkering with what everyone else dismisses as noise will unlock JN-25. His method will expose the location of the Japanese fleet, enable America's greatest naval victory, and save thousands of American lives. But first, he has to convince a room full of officers that a teenager with no formal training in cryptography has spotted something that the experts have been missing for over a year. The clock is ticking. The Japanese are planning something big, and nobody's listening to the kid. To understand why JN-25 seemed unbreakable, you have to understand its terrifying elegance. The Japanese Navy introduced this cipher system on June 1, 1939, specifically designed to resist Western cryptanalysis. Unlike simpler codes that substitute letters for letters, JN-25 operates in 2 brutal stages. First, Japanese messages are encoded using a massive codebook containing 33 5-digit code groups. The word battleship might become 15347. Tomorrow might be 2990 Han location. Names, ship designations, operational commands, all converted to anonymous numbers. Even if you intercept a message, you're staring at strings like 15347, 28901, 44213, 09876 that mean absolutely nothing without the codebook. But the Japanese didn't stop there. They knew that if Americans captured one of their codebooks, which happened in December 1940 when the British seized German papers from a captured ship, the entire system would collapse. So they added a second layer, additive encryption. Before transmission, operators add random 5-digit numbers from separate additive tables to each code group. Now, 15347 becomes 4SM892 or 9134 or any of billions of possible combinations. And those additive tables changed every few weeks, sometimes every few days. The numbers are devastating. Even with captured equipment and 6 months of messages, Agnes Driscoll, the Navy's legendary Madam X, who had broken previous Japanese codes, made virtually no progress. By early 1942, OP-20G could read perhaps 1% of intercepted JN-25 traffic, and most of that was old news about past operations. The messages that mattered, current fleet movements, upcoming attacks, remained opaque. The experts had tried everything. They'd built frequency analysis tables, attempted statistical attacks, looked for repeated patterns in thousands of messages. Mathematicians from Princeton and Yale worked 16-hour shifts. Nothing worked. The additive tables scrambled everything. It was like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces kept changing shape. Admiral Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, was losing patience. "Gentlemen," he told naval intelligence officers in March 1942, "the Japanese are running circles around us. They know where our ships are. We don't know where theirs are. This cannot continue." But nobody had answers. The Office of Naval Intelligence estimated it would take another 2 years to make meaningful progress on JN-25, assuming they could recruit 50 more cryptanalysts and double their computing resources. 2 years. By then, the war might be lost. Japanese strategists were already planning their next major offensive, a strike that would either knock America out of the Pacific or draw the U.S. Navy into a decisive trap. Those plans were being transmitted daily in JN-25 traffic. The messages flowed through the airwaves, captured by listening stations from Hawaii to Australia. Boxes of intercepted transmissions piled up in Building 1 at Pearl Harbor, and they might as well have been written in ancient Sumerian. The stakes extended beyond military defeat. Every day the code remained unbroken. American submarines hunted blindly. Transport convoys sailed without knowing Japanese carrier positions. Commanders made decisions based on guesswork. Men died because America was fighting deaf and blind. Captain Lawrence Safford, the father of Navy cryptanalysis, told colleagues that breaking JN-25 might be mathematically impossible. The problem space was simply too large. "We're looking for patterns in pure randomness," he said. "The additives ensure we'll never see the same encryption twice. Even if we had infinite time and infinite computing power, there's no guarantee we'd break it." Into this atmosphere of defeat and exhaustion stumbled a kid from Fresno, California, who wasn't supposed to be there, who had no business wearing that uniform, and who was about to prove all the experts catastrophically wrong. Andrew Mattei Gleason was born November 4, 1921, in Fresno, California, to a botanist father and a Swiss-American mother. He should have been starting college. Instead, on December 8, 1941, one day after Pearl Harbor, he stood in front of a Navy recruiting officer with a forged birth certificate claiming he was 19 years old. He was 17. His voice hadn't fully deepened. He barely needed to shave. "You're kind of skinny, kid," the recruiter said, looking him over. "You sure you want this?" Andrew wanted it desperately, not from patriotism alone, though that burned in him. He wanted it because he was bored, crushingly, devastatingly bored. He'd graduated Roosevelt High School in Yonkers a year early, spent a restless year doing odd jobs, and discovered he had a peculiar talent that nobody seemed to value. He could see patterns in chaos. Give him a page of numbers, a broken machine, a scattered puzzle, and his mind would automatically start organizing it, finding the hidden structure. His father thought he should go to college. His mother wanted him to wait until he was older. But Andrew had watched newsreels of burning ships at Pearl Harbor, and something in him snapped into focus. This was real. This mattered. This was a puzzle worth solving. The Navy, desperate for bodies, didn't look too closely at his birth certificate. By January 1942, Seaman Apprentice Gleason was assigned to OP-20G, the Navy's cryptanalysis division, not because of any special qualifications, but because he'd mentioned on his intake form that he liked math and puzzles. That was enough. They needed everyone they could get. He arrived at the Nebraska Avenue complex in Washington, D.C. on February 3, 1942, a baby-faced kid in an ill-fitting uniform walking into a building full of Naval Academy graduates and Ivy League mathematicians. Commander Howard Engstrom took one look at him and sighed. "They're sending us children now?" "I'm 19, sir," Andrew lied automatically. "Sure you are. Can you type?" "Yes, sir." "Good. You'll work message sorting. 10-hour shifts. Don't touch anything important. Don't bother the real cryptanalysts. Just sort the intercepts by frequency and date. Think you can handle that without screwing it up?" Andrew nodded. It wasn't what he'd imagined. He'd pictured himself heroically breaking codes like the adventure serials, but it was a start. For 2 months, he sorted messages, thousands of them, 5-digit groups, endless and meaningless. He wasn't allowed to work on actual cryptanalysis. He didn't have the credentials, the training, or the rank. He just sorted and filed and tried not to be noticed. But Andrew Gleason had a problem. He couldn't not notice patterns. It was like telling him not to breathe. As he sorted those messages day after day, his mind kept cataloging inconsistencies, little things that didn't quite fit. And late at night, alone in his barracks, he started writing them down in a notebook he wasn't supposed to have. He was about to stumble onto something that would change everything. And when he tried to report it, they'd tell him to shut up and get back to filing. April 1942. Andrew Gleason has been sorting messages for 10 weeks when he notices something impossible. It's 2 a.m. and he's supposed to be asleep, but instead he's in the cryptanalysis room with permission from the night duty officer, a young ensign who doesn't care what the kid does as long as he doesn't bother anyone. Andrew spreads out 60 intercepted messages across an empty desk. They're all from the same Japanese transmission station, all sent during March. Standard procedure says you look for repeated code groups. The same 5-digit number appearing in multiple messages might be a common word like "the" or "attack." But additive encryption should make that impossible. The additives should randomize everything. Except Andrew's been noticing that certain messages sent from Tokyo to Berlin have letter indicators, metadata at the beginning of the transmission, that only use the first 13 letters of the alphabet, and messages from Berlin to Tokyo only use the last 13 letters. It's barely noticeable. Nobody's mentioned it in any of the analysis reports he's filed. He grabs a pencil. What if, and this seems crazy, what if the unencrypted indicators follow the same pattern? What if Tokyo to Berlin headers use only A through M in plaintext, and Berlin to Tokyo uses N through Z? If that's true, and if you know the plaintext structure of the indicators, you could subtract the plaintext from the encrypted indicator to recover part of the additive table. And if you have part of the additive table, you can start peeling back the encryption on the actual message content. Andrew works through the math. His hands shake slightly. It's such a stupid, simple idea. Surely the real cryptanalysts have thought of this, but he checks the analysis logs. Nothing. Nobody's following this thread. By 5 a.m., he's tested his hypothesis on 5 messages. It works. He can recover indicator additives with 73% accuracy. His crude method, just pencil and paper, has given him a foothold into the supposedly unbreakable additive system. He needs to tell someone, but who? He's a kid, a message sorter. The actual cryptanalysts barely acknowledge his existence. Marshall Hall Jr., one of the lead mathematicians, once told him, "Son, you're here to file papers, not to play codebreaker." Andrew approaches Lieutenant Commander Howard Engstrom during the morning shift change. "Sir, I think I found something in the JN-25 traffic. The indicator headers might be—" "Not now, Gleason. We're busy." "But sir, if we know the plaintext structure of the—" "Gleason, I'm going to say this once. You've been here 10 weeks. Agnes Driscoll has been breaking codes since before you were born. Joe Rochefort fought in the First World War. We have Yale mathematicians and Naval Academy cryptographers working 16-hour days on this. Do you seriously think you've spotted something they've all missed? Maybe. I have the math I can show. That's enough. Get back to message sorting. That's your job. Do your job. Andrew returns to his desk, notebook in hand. The breakthrough sits there, 73% validated, and nobody wants to hear it. In his notes, he writes, "They think I'm too young to matter. Maybe I am, but the math doesn't care how old I am." For 3 weeks, Andrew Gleason keeps his discovery to himself. He refines it, tests it on more messages, improves his accuracy to 81%. He develops statistical tests to validate his recovered additives. The method works. He knows it works. But nobody will listen to a 17-year-old message sorter. Then, on May 11, 1942, everything changes. Admiral Nimitz arrives at Building 1 for an emergency briefing. Japanese radio traffic has exploded. Something big is coming. Rochefort's team knows it's a major offensive, but they can't pinpoint where. The partially broken intercepts mention a location designated AF. Is it Alaska, Australia, the Aleutians? They're flying blind. In the briefing room, tension crackles like static electricity. Rochefort presents what little they know. "We're reading maybe 5% of current JN-25 traffic, sir. We can confirm major carrier movements, but locations and timing remain unclear. The additive tables are changed too frequently. We can't crack them fast enough." Admiral Nimitz stares at the map. "Commander, I need to know where they're hitting. If I deploy the fleet to the wrong location, we lose the Pacific. Do you understand? Everything depends on you people breaking that code." "Sir, we're doing everything." Andrew Gleason stands up. He doesn't mean to. His body just moves. Every rule of military protocol says he should sit down and shut up. He's the lowest-ranked person in the room. But the words come out, "Sir, I think I know how to break the additives." The room erupts. Officers shout over each other. Who the hell is this kid? How did a seaman apprentice get into a classified briefing? Rochefort looks like he's aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "Gleason, sit down," Engstrom hisses. "But I've been testing a method." "Gleason, sit down." Nimitz holds up a hand. The room falls silent. Let him speak. Andrew's mouth goes dry. He's never spoken to an admiral before. He can feel every eye boring into him. His voice cracks as he starts. "Sir, the indicator headers in Tokyo-Berlin traffic use split alphabets. A through M one direction, N through Z the other. If we assume plain text follows the same pattern, we can recover additive tables by subtraction. I've tested it on 47 messages with 81% accuracy." Lieutenant Commander Thomas Dyer, one of Rochefort's senior cryptanalysts, leans forward. Wait, say that again about the alphabet split." Andrew repeats it, faster now, more confident. He shows his notebook. The math spills out. Pattern recognition, frequency analysis, statistical validation. It's crude compared to the elegant theories the Yale mathematicians use, but it's concrete, it's testable, it works. Dyer grabs the notebook, scans it, and his eyes widen. "Joe, look at this. The kid might be onto something." Marshall Hall Jr. crowds in. So does Agnes Driscoll. They pass the notebook around, checking calculations, testing assumptions. The room divides instantly. Half the officers think this is absurd, a waste of time from an unqualified child. The other half sees what Andrew sees, a crack in the fortress wall. "This is insane," Captain Joseph Wenger says. "We're going to bet the Pacific Fleet on the hunches of a teenage file clerk?" "It's not a hunch," Dyer counters. "The math is solid. We can test it right now." "On what timeline?" "Nimitz needs answers in weeks, not months." "So we work faster." Rochefort looks at Andrew, really looks at him for the first time. "Gleason, how old are you? Really?" The room goes quiet. Andrew feels his forged birth certificate burning a hole in his file somewhere. 19, sir." "Uh-huh, and I'm the Queen of England." Rochefort turns to Nimitz. "Sir, I don't care if he's 12. If this method works, it might give us the breakthrough we need." Nimitz studies Andrew for a long moment. Then he nods. "Test it. You have 72 hours. If it works, I want every available cryptanalyst implementing Gleason's method immediately. If it doesn't work..." He doesn't finish the sentence. He doesn't need to. CTA, there's one. If you're fascinated by the untold stories of World War II heroes who changed history, hit that subscribe button. We upload new documentaries every week exploring the people and moments that shaped our world. Don't miss the next one. 72 hours. Andrew Gleason doesn't sleep. None of them do. The cryptanalysis team divides into two groups. One continuing traditional attacks on JN25, the other testing Andrew's indicator subtraction method. The kid who was sorting messages 3 weeks ago now sits at a table with Agnes Driscoll, Marshall Hall Jr., and Tom Dyer, the best codebreakers in the American military. Driscoll handles him roughly at first. She's broken Japanese, German, and Italian codes. She doesn't suffer fools, and she especially doesn't suffer teenage boys who think they've discovered something everyone else missed. But as they work through intercept after intercept, her attitude shifts. The method works. More than that, it's faster than anything they've tried. Within 16 hours, they've recovered enough additives to begin stripping encryption from current traffic. By hour 36, they're reading fragments of operational orders. By hour 60, they've decoded enough to confirm Rochefort's suspicion. AF is Midway Island. The Japanese are planning a massive carrier strike in early June. 4 to 6 carriers, dozens of support ships, an invasion force to capture the island. Nimitz gets the intelligence brief on May 14, 1942. The location, the timing, the force composition, everything he needs to plan an ambush. He sends 3 carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, barely repaired from earlier battles, to position themselves northeast of Midway. The Japanese don't know they're walking into a trap, but the intelligence keeps coming, and it's Andrew's method that's unlocking it. By May 27th, OP-20G is reading 40% of current JN-25 traffic, an unprecedented breakthrough. They identify the Japanese carrier divisions, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, the flagship commanders, the attack timeline. Even the morning of June 4th gets confirmation when decoded intercepts reveal Japanese pilots being briefed for dawn strikes on Midway's airfield. On June 4th, 1942, at 10:26 a.m., dive bombers from Enterprise and Yorktown catch 3 Japanese carriers with their decks full of armed and fueled aircraft. In 5 minutes, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu are burning wrecks. Hiryu launches a counterstrike that cripples Yorktown, but American bombers find her in the afternoon. By sunset, 4 Japanese fleet carriers are sinking. Japan loses 248 aircraft, 3,057 men, and its best carrier pilots. The Battle of Midway isn't just a victory, it's the turning point of the Pacific War. Before Midway, Japan held the initiative, choosing when and where to strike. After Midway, they're on the defensive. Their carrier strength shattered, their operational plans exposed. And it happened because a 17-year-old with a forged birth certificate noticed that indicator headers used split alphabets. After Midway, OP-20G becomes an intelligence factory. Andrew's indicator subtraction method evolves into a comprehensive system for attacking additive tables. The team develops mechanical aids, early IBM tabulators adapted for cryptanalysis. By August 1942, they're reading 60% of JN-25 traffic. By October, 75%. The intelligence saves thousands of lives. On August 24, 1942, decoded JN-25 traffic reveals Japanese plans to land reinforcements at Guadalcanal. American naval forces intercept them at the Battle of the Eastern Solomons. The Japanese lose a light carrier and dozens of transport ships. On October 26th, advance warning from JN-25 decrypts, allows American carriers to ambush a Japanese task force at Santa Cruz. The kill ratios flip. In 1941, Japan sank 3 American ships for every one they lost. By late 1942, America is sinking 2 Japanese ships for every one lost. Submarine warfare transforms completely. U.S. submarines equipped with decoded Japanese convoy routes begin a campaign of systematic destruction. In 1941, American submarines sank 180,000 tons of Japanese merchant shipping. In 1943, armed with JN-25 intelligence, they sink 1.5 million tons. Japan's economy strangles. Oil from the Dutch East Indies can't reach Japanese refineries. Troops in New Guinea and the Philippines run short of food and ammunition, all because American submarines know exactly where the convoys will be. Even the Japanese notice. A captured diary from a Japanese naval officer, recovered in late 1943, reads, "The Americans seem to know our movements before we do. How is this possible? Our codes are unbreakable. Our communication officers assure us the enemy cannot read our messages. Yet their submarines are always waiting, their carriers always in the right position. It is as if they can read our minds." They could. They were reading the messages, every operational order, every fleet movement, every convoy route, all decoded, translated, and delivered to American commanders within hours. In November 1943, Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz visited OP-20G. The cryptanalysts had just provided intelligence that allowed U.S. forces to ambush and kill Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the architect of Pearl Harbor. Nimitz walked through the basement facilities, shook hands with the codebreakers, and stopped at Andrew Gleason's desk. Gleason, now officially 19 and actually 18, stood at attention. "At ease, son," Nimitz said. "I've read the reports about Midway, about your work on JN-25. Do you understand what you accomplished?" "We broke their codes, sir." "You did more than that. You saved the Pacific Fleet. You probably saved thousands of American lives." "How old are you, really?" Andrew hesitated. The truth seemed absurd now. 18, sir." Nimitz smiled slightly. "When this war ends, you're going to college. That's an order. Men like you shouldn't be filing messages. You should be teaching cryptanalysis to the next generation." He paused. "But for now, keep breaking their codes. We're counting on you." The war in the Pacific still had 2 brutal years to run. But from June 1942 onward, America fought with its eyes open. And every victory, every saved life, every successful ambush traced back, in part, to a teenager who lied about his age and accidentally cracked an unbreakable code. CTA number 2. This is the kind of history they don't teach in school. Real people making impossible decisions under incredible pressure. If you're enjoying this, hit the like button and share it with someone who loves military history. And check out our video on the Battle of Midway to see how this intelligence changed everything. When World War II ended in August 1945, Andrew Gleason faced a choice. The Navy wanted him to stay. The newly formed National Security Agency needed experienced cryptanalysts. They offered him rank, salary, a career in the shadows. But Admiral Nimitz's order echoed in his mind. "You're going to college." He enrolled at Yale in the fall of 1946 as a freshman, though he'd already done work that most PhD mathematicians would envy. He never talked about his war service. The code breaking remained classified. His classmates had no idea that the quiet guy in their calculus class had helped win the Battle of Midway. But the war changed him. That basement in Pearl Harbor had shown him what mathematics could do when applied to real problems. Not abstract theory for its own sake, but concrete puzzles with life or death stakes. He finished his Yale degree in 1949 and joined Harvard's mathematics department, where he would spend the next 4 decades solving problems everyone else thought were impossible. In 1952, he solved Hilbert's fifth problem, one of mathematics' most famous unsolved challenges. In 1957, he published Gleason's theorem, which revolutionized quantum mechanics. His work on Ramsey theory, coding theory, and mathematical education influenced generations of students. He won the Newcomb-Cleveland Prize, served as president of the American Mathematical Society, and held the Hollis Chair of Mathematics at Harvard. But the codebreaking stayed classified until 1996, when the NSA began declassifying World War II cryptanalysis records. Researchers finally learned the full story of JN25, OP20G, and the indicator subtraction method that cracked the Japanese naval code. Andrew Gleason's name appeared in the historical reports, though by then he was in his 70s, more interested in teaching than in rehashing old glories. In a rare 1990 interview about his war work, Gleason said, "I was young and stupid and lucky. The real heroes were the people like Rochefort and Driscoll, who'd been fighting that code for years. I just noticed something they'd been too busy to see." If anything, it proves that sometimes you need fresh eyes on a problem. The experts had been staring at JN25 so long, they couldn't see past their assumptions. The numbers tell the story better than words. Before Andrew Gleason's indicator breakthrough in May 1942, OP20G could read 5% of current JN25 traffic. After implementing his method, that jumped to 40% within weeks and 75% by year's end. Historians estimate that JN25 intelligence directly contributed to sinking over 800 Japanese ships, saving at least 50,000 American lives, and shortening the Pacific War by potentially 18 months. Andrew Gleason died on October 17, 2008, at age 86. His obituaries focused on his mathematical achievements, Hilbert's fifth problem, his quantum mechanics work, his education reforms. Most didn't mention the war. Most didn't know. But in the Cryptologic Museum at NSA headquarters, there's a small display about JN25. It mentions Agnes Driscoll, Joe Rochefort, Marshall Hall Jr., and other legends of American cryptanalysis. And in one corner there's a photograph of a baby-faced kid in an ill-fitting Navy uniform, standing in front of a desk covered in 5-digit number groups. The caption reads, "Seaman Andrew M. Gleason, OP20G, 1942. His indicator subtraction method helped break JN25 and win the Battle of Midway." It doesn't mention that he was 17. It doesn't mention the forged birth certificate. But the historians know, and now so do you. The lesson isn't about lying to join the military, though thousands of young men did exactly that in World War II. The lesson is about what's possible when someone refuses to accept that a problem is unsolvable. When fresh eyes look at old assumptions. When a kid who's not supposed to be in the room speaks up anyway. The code wasn't really unbreakable. It just needed someone who didn't know it was supposed to be impossible. And sometimes that's all it takes to change the world.
October 1959, 320 nautical miles northeast of Iceland. The North Atlantic rolls dark and heavy under a moonless sky, swells driven by autumn storms that have battered the Greenland-Iceland-United Kingdom gap for 3 straight days. 200 feet below the surface, USS Amberjack hangs motionless in the thermal layer, her diesel engines silent, batteries providing just enough power to maintain depth and life support. Inside the control room, the air tastes of amine scrubber chemicals and the metallic tang of recycled atmosphere. Condensation beads on cold steel bulkheads, despite the best efforts of overworked ventilation systems. The overhead lights have been dimmed to preserve power. In the red glow of battle lanterns, 23 men work at their stations with the disciplined quiet of submariners who understand that sound is the difference between hunter and hunted. Second-class Petty Officer James Whitten has been on sonar watch for 6 hours and 14 minutes. His logbook records the monotonous litany of ocean background, distant merchant traffic transiting the Denmark Strait, biological noise from migrating whale pods, the rhythmic crash of surface wave action transmitted through hundreds of feet of seawater. Whitten wears the BQR-2B passive sonar headset with one ear cup slightly off-center, an old submariner's trick that allows him to hear both the hydrophone array and any urgent voice communication from the control room without removing the headset entirely. His eyes track the pale green waterfall display, watching for the vertical striations that would indicate propeller cavitation or machinery noise distinct from the ocean's natural symphony. At 0342 hours, something changes. A low-frequency mechanical rhythm appears in Whitten's headphones, faint but distinct. Not biologics, not merchant traffic with its characteristic higher-pitched screw wash. This is deeper, more deliberate, with the regular cadence that speaks of military-grade propulsion. Whitten's hand moves to the gain control, increasing sensitivity on the bearing where the contact has appeared. The signal strengthens. Definite mechanical origin. Twin screws turning at approximately 90 revolutions per minute. Course approximately 270 degrees, heading west-southwest toward the gap. Speed estimated 7 knots. Depth approximately 150 feet, based on acoustic propagation characteristics. Whitten keys his communication circuit. His voice is calm, professionally neutral, betraying none of the adrenaline spike that comes with detecting what might be hostile contact. Sonar, new contact, designated Sierra 1, bearing 352 degrees. Twin screws, mechanical signature, consistent with submarine. Range indeterminate, signal strength moderate. Contact appears to be transiting westbound. In the control room, Commander Thomas Harper straightens from the chart table where he has been reviewing the patrol orders that brought Amberjack to this exact position at this exact time. Harper is 41 years old, a career submariner who enlisted in 1936 and earned his commission during the war. He has commanded Amberjack for 26 months, long enough to know every quirk of her guppy-converted systems, long enough to trust his crew's competence implicitly. He crosses to the sonar station in 4 strides, his rubber-soled shoes making no sound on the deck plates. Harper does not immediately speak. He stands behind Whitten's station, watching the waterfall display, listening to the faint audio feed from the external speakers. 30 seconds of observation. Professional assessment. The signal is real. The bearing is stable. The acoustic characteristics match intelligence briefings. Harper studied during the pre-patrol briefing at Submarine Squadron 4 headquarters in Key West 3 weeks earlier. Soviet submarine, likely diesel-electric based on the machinery signature. The twin screw configuration and the specific frequency range suggest a Zulu-class boat, possibly one of the 6 Zulu V variants that NATO intelligence suspects have been converted to carry ballistic missiles. Harper speaks quietly to his executive officer, Lieutenant Commander Robert Marsh, who has materialized at his elbow. If that's what I think it is, we just won the intelligence lottery. Get the crew to tracking stations. Silent routine, no active sonar under any circumstances. We're going to follow this contact and see where he's going. The decision Harper has just made carries implications that extend far beyond Amberjack's pressure hull. The year is 1959, 14 years into the Cold War, 4 years after the Geneva summit had briefly promised détente, 2 years after Sputnik had shocked America into recognizing Soviet technological capability. The strategic landscape has shifted with terrifying speed. Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev has publicly boasted that the Soviet Union is producing missiles like sausages, threatening to bury capitalism through superior industrial production. American intelligence agencies are desperate for hard information about Soviet naval capabilities. particularly regarding submarine-launched ballistic missiles that could strike American coastal cities with virtually no warning. The GIUK Gap, the choke point between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom, represents the most critical defensive line in the Atlantic. Any Soviet submarine transiting from northern fleet bases to the open Atlantic must pass through this relatively narrow corridor. American and NATO forces maintain persistent surveillance, using a combination of long-range patrol aircraft, surface vessels, submarine patrols, and classified hydrophone arrays planted on the ocean floor. The mission is simple in concept, enormously complex in execution. Detect Soviet submarines attempting Atlantic transit, track them for as long as possible to gather intelligence on capabilities and operating patterns, photograph them when opportunities arise, and under no circumstances allow the Soviets to know they have been detected. USS Amberjack is perfectly positioned for exactly this mission, though her presence in the gap is not accidental. She is one of 52 American fleet submarines that have undergone guppy conversion between 1947 and 1963, transformed from World War II surface raiders into true underwater hunters, optimized for Cold War operations. The Guppy II modification that Amberjack received at Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in 1947 had streamlined her hull, doubled her battery capacity from 252 cells to 504 cells, installed a snorkel system allowing diesel operation at periscope depth, and upgraded her sonar suite and fire control systems. The result is a submarine that can sustain 15 to 16 knots submerged for over an hour, or maintain slower speeds for days if necessary, all while generating far less acoustic signature than the first-generation nuclear submarines that are just beginning to enter service. Harper understands both the capabilities and the limitations of his boat, with the intimate knowledge that comes from 2 years of intensive operations. Amberjack can outrun most Soviet diesel-electric submarines in short sprints. Her streamlined guppy hull generates significantly less flow noise than traditional fleet boat configurations. When running on batteries with diesel engines secured, she is quieter than USS Nautilus or any of the early nuclear boats whose reactor cooling pumps create constant broadband noise. But batteries are finite. At current load with main engines secured and minimal hotel services, Harper has perhaps 18 to 20 hours of battery endurance before he will be forced to snorkel and recharge, exposing a mast above the surface and risking detection by radar or visual observation. The decision calculus is brutal in its simplicity. If Harper commits to tracking this Soviet submarine, he is betting Amberjack's entire battery capacity on the intelligence value of the contact. If the Soviet boat is merely a patrol submarine conducting routine transit, the intelligence gain might not justify the operational risk. But if this is one of the Zulu V missile boats that NATO desperately wants to photograph and characterize, 18 hours of tracking could provide intelligence worth millions of dollars in Cold War currency. Harper makes his choice in the 30 seconds it takes to cross from the sonar station back to the chart table. He will track. He will follow this Soviet submarine for as long as batteries allow, or until the contact demonstrates capabilities that definitively identify it as a strategic asset. And he will do it without being detected, because detection would not only end the tracking mission, but would also inform the Soviets that American submarines are capable of trailing them undetected through their home waters. An intelligence loss, potentially more damaging than any gain from identification. The crew understands what is happening without requiring detailed explanation. Amberjack's officers and enlisted men have trained for exactly this scenario through countless exercises. They know the procedures for silent running, battery conservation, passive tracking, and the psychological discipline required to maintain operations for extended periods without surfacing or transmitting. They settle into their stations with the calm professionalism of men who have volunteered for submarine duty precisely because it offers these moments: the silent hunt, the patient stalk, the invisible war fought in darkness where skill and determination matter more than brute technological superiority. Lieutenant Commander Marsh moves through the boat on silent routine, personally verifying that every piece of loose gear is secured, every unnecessary system is shut down, every potential noise source is eliminated. In the engine room, the massive Fairbanks Morse diesel engines sit cold and silent, their warmth gradually dissipating into the surrounding seawater. The motor room hums with the subdued whine of electric drive motors pulling current from the battery banks, spinning the single propeller at minimal revolutions designed to maintain steerage while minimizing cavitation noise. In the forward torpedo room, 6 Mark 14 torpedoes rest in their tubes, loaded and ready, but with firing solutions unentered, because Harper has no intention of shooting unless Amberjack faces imminent destruction. In the crew's mess, men who are not on watch lie in their bunks, trying to rest, but finding sleep difficult with the knowledge that somewhere in the darkness outside the hull, a Soviet submarine is moving through the same water. The galley is secured except for the coffee urn, which remains hot because submariners run on caffeine as much as they run on battery power. The smell of old coffee mixes with the ever-present odor of diesel fuel, hydraulic fluid, and the sharp chemical bite of the CO2 scrubbers working overtime to keep the atmosphere breathable. The tracking begins in earnest at 03:55 hours. Witten calls out bearing updates every 60 seconds as the Soviet submarine maintains steady course and speed. Harper positions Amberjack on a parallel course offset by approximately 4,000 yards, close enough for solid sonar contact, but far enough to minimize the risk of counter-detection if the Soviet sonarman is competent. The American boat settles into what submariners call the trail position, following slightly behind and to the side of the target, using the target's own noise to mask any sounds Amberjack might generate. The mathematics of underwater pursuit are unforgiving. Sound travels at approximately 1,500 meters per second in seawater, but the speed varies with temperature, salinity, and pressure. The seasonal thermal layer at 150 feet acts as a partial acoustic barrier, bending sound waves in ways that can either help or hinder detection, depending on the geometry of the pursuit. Harper keeps Amberjack slightly below the thermal layer, using it to shield his boat from any upward-looking sonar the Soviet submarine might employ, while still maintaining good signal strength on the downward propagating noise from the target's machinery. For the first hour, the pursuit is almost routine. The Soviet boat shows no indication of awareness that it is being followed. The bearing drift is consistent with a submarine on a planned navigation track, probably following a pre-briefed route through the gap designed to minimize exposure to known NATO surveillance assets. The contact maintains 7 knots, a speed that suggests battery conservation rather than urgency. This supports Harper's assessment that the Soviet captain believes himself undetected and is conducting a standard transit rather than an emergency run. Harper uses this stable period to establish baseline acoustic data. He has Witten document every characteristic of the target's sound signature, the blade rate of the propellers, the frequency of machinery vibrations, any harmonic overtones that might indicate specific equipment. This information will be valuable to American intelligence, even if visual identification later proves impossible. Each Soviet submarine has unique acoustic characteristics based on manufacturing tolerances, equipment installations, and maintenance history. Building a library of these signatures allows American forces to track individual boats across multiple deployments. At 0445 hours, 1 hour and 3 minutes into the pursuit, the first complication arises. A merchant ship appears on sonar, transiting north through the gap. The freighter's screws create a wall of noise that temporarily masks the Soviet submarine's signature. Witten loses the clean signal for 47 seconds, tracking only on bearing rate and historical data. Harper makes a quick decision, maintain course and speed, trusting Witten to reacquire contact when the merchant clears. The gamble pays off. As the freighter passes, the Soviet submarine's signature emerges from the noise exactly where Harper's dead reckoning predicted. But the incident highlights the fragility of the pursuit. Amberjack is tracking on passive sonar alone, which means she has no precise range to target. Harper knows the bearing, the direction to the Soviet boat, but the distance is estimated from signal strength and propagation characteristics. If the Soviet captain makes an unexpected maneuver during a period when Amberjack's sonar is masked by other noise, the American boat could lose contact permanently. The crew settles into the rhythm of extended operations. Watch sections rotate on a compressed schedule, 4 hours on, 4 hours off, which is exhausting but necessary to maintain alertness during the critical tracking mission. In the control room, Harper and Marsh trade off command responsibilities. One always present to make tactical decisions, while the other grabs brief rest periods in the tiny captain's cabin. Neither man sleeps deeply. The responsibility of command does not permit genuine rest during operations like this. By hour 2, the battery's state of charge has dropped to 87%. Harper updates his mental calculations. At current consumption rates, assuming no high-speed maneuvers are required, Amberjack can maintain pursuit for approximately 16 more hours before reaching minimum safe battery level. That minimum is not 0. Harper must reserve enough power to clear the area at high speed if detected, to reach a safe snorkeling position, and to defend the boat if attacked. Running batteries to absolute exhaustion would be suicidal. At 0520 hours, 4 hours and 38 minutes into the tracking mission, the character of the pursuit changes dramatically. The Soviet submarine executes a sharp turn to port, changing course by 45 degrees and simultaneously increasing speed to approximately 12 knots. The maneuver is abrupt enough that it cannot be explained by normal navigation. Either the Soviet captain is executing a pre-planned evasion route, or he has detected something that makes him suspicious. Witten's voice carries the first real tension since the tracking began. Con, sonar. Sierra 1 has altered course to port, new heading approximately 225 degrees. Speed increasing, estimate 12 knots. Blade rate increasing proportionally. Classify as possible evasive maneuver. Harper's jaw tightens. The decision tree has just become significantly more complex. If he orders Amberjack to follow the course change immediately, matching the Soviet maneuver, he risks confirming any suspicions the Soviet captain might have by creating a correlated movement that even a mediocre sonar man would recognize as evidence of a tail. Submarines do not randomly turn in the open ocean at the same moment unless they are following each other. But if Harper maintains current course and allows the bearing to drift, he will lose contact within 30 to 40 minutes as the Soviet boat opens range and disappears into the acoustic clutter of the North Atlantic. Harper chooses aggression masked by patience. He will match the Soviet course change, but not immediately. He will allow 90 seconds to elapse, enough time to break the temporal correlation between the Soviet maneuver and Amberjack's response, then execute his own turn to a pursuit course that will close the range slightly while maintaining the offset geometry that has worked so far. Helm, come right to heading 230 degrees. Make your speed 6 knots. Smooth turn, no rapid course changes. Make it look like normal navigation drift if anyone's listening. Harper's voice is steady, conveying none of the tension that comes with knowing this single maneuver might determine whether the mission succeeds or fails. Amberjack comes right in a gentle arc, her single propeller biting into the water with carefully controlled thrust. The helmsman uses minimal rudder angle to avoid creating flow noise across the control surfaces. In the sonar shack, Witten adjusts his tracking solution, compensating for own ship motion to maintain accurate bearing on the Soviet contact. The relative motion problem, determining the true course and speed of a target when your own platform is also moving, is one of the fundamental challenges of submarine warfare. The next 10 minutes are the longest of Harper's career. If the Soviet boat executes another radical maneuver, it will confirm that their captain suspects pursuit and is actively trying to shake a tail. If the contact settles back into steady transit, Harper can breathe easier, knowing the turn had been routine evasion rather than response to definite detection. 8 minutes and 40 seconds after the Soviet course change, the contact steadies on heading 220 degrees and reduces speed back to 7 knots. Harper allows himself a controlled exhale. Routine evasion. The Soviet captain is following a pre-planned route designed to complicate any trailing solution, but he has not definitively detected Amberjack. The hunt can continue. But the Soviet maneuver has consumed battery capacity, at rates Harper had not planned for. The higher speed required to close range during the turn drew current from the batteries at nearly double the normal rate. 6 minutes at 6 knots instead of 4 knots might not sound significant, but in the brutal arithmetic of battery-powered submarine operations, those 6 minutes have cost Harper approximately 45 minutes of total endurance. His comfortable 18-hour estimate has just become 16 hours, and every subsequent maneuver will consume more of that dwindling margin. Before we continue this underwater chess game, take a moment to subscribe to Cold War Chronicles. We explore the hidden conflicts that shaped our world, uncovering the technology and tactics that kept superpowers locked in silent competition beneath the waves. The Soviet submarine continues westbound, settling back into what appears to be steady transit profile. Harper orders the crew to 4-hour watch rotations, allowing men to rest in shifts while maintaining full coverage of all essential stations. The sonar watch changes, with Petty Officer Second Class Michael Torres relieving Witten. The new sonarman settles into his headphones, studying the waterfall display, learning the specific acoustic signature of this particular Soviet boat, so he can detect the smallest change in operating profile. Torres is 23 years old, from San Diego, and has been a sonarman for 4 years. He has spent hundreds of hours in training simulators, learning to distinguish submarine signatures from biological noise, from geological sounds, from the complex acoustic environment of the ocean. But this is only his 3rd time tracking a real Soviet submarine, and the first time the contact has been held for more than a few hours. His hands are steady as he adjusts the game controls, but Harper can see the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes fix on the waterfall display with almost religious intensity. By hour 6, clear patterns are emerging in the Soviet submarine's behavior. The boat maintains course and speed with almost metronomic consistency, suggesting either very precise navigation or possibly autopilot control of steering and propulsion. Every 90 minutes, almost to the minute, the contact executes a minor course change of 5 to 10 degrees, zigzagging in a pattern that would complicate any fire control solution, while allowing the Soviet sonarman to clear baffles, the blind spot directly astern, where the submarine's own propeller noise masks incoming signals. Harper uses these predictable maneuvers to his advantage, timing Amberjack's own course adjustments to occur during the Soviet zigs and zags, when any sound Amberjack generates will be masked by the target's own machinery transients. It is submarine hide-and-seek played at the highest level of professional competence, a game where the penalty for losing is not embarrassment, but potential international incident and the loss of intelligence capability that has taken years to develop. The hours accumulate with the slow inexorability of battery drain. 6 hours becomes 7. 7 becomes 8. The crew settles deeper into the rhythm of extended submerged operations. Minimal movement, quiet conversation conducted in whispers, the constant background hum of ventilation fans struggling to circulate air that grows increasingly stale despite the best efforts of the CO2 scrubbers. The temperature in the boat rises slowly as body heat from 23 men accumulates in the confined spaces, and the cooling systems work to balance thermal signature against the need to remove heat from the interior. In the galley, the cook prepares sandwiches in silence, avoiding the clatter of metal utensils that could transmit through the hull into the water. The menu is cold cuts and bread, nothing that requires cooking or generates food odors that would make the already marginal air quality worse. Men eat at their stations, maintaining watch discipline even as fatigue begins to accumulate from the extended period of heightened alertness. Coffee consumption increases. The head sees constant quiet traffic as the crew processes the coffee and the drinking water they consume to stay hydrated in the warm, dry air. By hour 9, Harper faces his first serious fatigue management problem. Lieutenant Commander Marsh reports that 2 members of the engineering watch are showing signs of exhaustion, slower reaction times, minor errors in logging procedures. Harper makes the decision to pull them off watch early and replace them with men who have had more recent rest. This reduces his reserve, manpower, the pool of fresh crew he can draw on if the pursuit extends beyond 12 hours. But immediate performance matters more than theoretical future needs. The battery state of charge has dropped to 62%. Harper updates his calculations again. At current drain rates, factoring in the reserve power he must maintain for contingencies, Amberjack has approximately 7 more hours of tracking capability before he will be forced to break off contact and proceed to snorkeling depth regardless of tactical situation. 7 hours might be enough, or it might not. Everything depends on whether the Soviet submarine surfaces or continues this steady underwater transit. At hour 10, Torres reports a subtle change in the target's acoustic signature. Con, sonar. Sierra 1, showing slight reduction in machinery noise. Estimate possible reduction in hotel electrical load. Could indicate they're securing non-essential systems. Harper considers the implications. If the Soviet submarine is reducing electrical consumption, it suggests their captain is also managing battery endurance, which means the Soviet boat is also diesel-electric rather than nuclear-powered. This supports the Zulu-class identification. But it also means both submarines are now in a race against battery depletion. Whichever boat runs out of power first will be forced to surface or snorkel, exposing itself to detection. Harper has bet that the Soviet boat will reach that point first, but there is no guarantee. The pursuit continues through hour 11 with the steady, grinding tension of a marathon rather than a sprint. Harper stands at the chart table, plotting estimated positions based on dead reckoning navigation. Without the ability to surface for star sites or radio navigation fixes, Amberjack's position is approximate at best. The inertial navigation system, a complex gyroscope array, drifts by approximately 1 nautical mile for every 8 hours of submerged operations. After 11 hours, Harper's position uncertainty is nearly 1.5 miles in any direction. At hour 11 and 42 minutes, the Soviet submarine's behavior changes again in a way that sends Harper's tactical assessment into immediate recalculation. The steady 7-knot transit speed drops to 4 knots. The contact descends from 150 feet to 230 feet, dropping below the seasonal thermal layer into colder, denser water, where acoustic propagation characteristics change dramatically. Torres reports the depth change immediately, his voice betraying slight concern at the tactical implications. Harper understands what is happening. The Soviet captain is either conducting a pre-planned passive sonar search, slowing down and going deep to minimize own-ship noise while listening for any trailing contacts, or he has decided to lie quiet and see if anyone is following close enough to be detected during the slowdown. Either way, it is a tactical challenge that requires careful response. Harper orders Amberjack to match the depth change but maintain slightly higher speed, 5 knots instead of 4. This will gradually close the range over the next hour, but the closure rate will be slow enough that it should not create an obvious sonar signature. Make your depth 230 feet. Maintain current course. Reduce speed to 5 knots. Slow deceleration over 2 minutes. I want this to look like natural drift, not a tactical maneuver. Amberjack descends slowly, the hull groaning slightly as the external pressure increases. At 230 feet, the pressure is approximately 100 pounds per square inch, well within the submarine's test depth, but enough that the crew can hear the subtle sounds of the pressure hull adjusting to the load. The temperature drops as they enter colder water. Condensation on the bulkheads increases. For 2 hours, hours 12 through 14 of the pursuit, both submarines move slowly through the deep Atlantic, engaged in a silent battle of nerves and technical competence. The Soviet sonarman is undoubtedly listening, searching for any anomaly in the ocean background that would indicate a trailing contact. Torres is doing the same, monitoring the Soviet boat while simultaneously listening for any indication that the Soviets have detected American presence. The tension in Amberjack's control room is physical, a weight that presses down on every man present. Harper stands at the chart table, hands flat on the navigation charts, staring at the plot without really seeing it. His mind is running through contingency plans. Marsh monitors the battery status, watching the indicators drop with mathematical inevitability. 54%, 52%, 50%. At hour 13, Harper authorizes a brief meal service, sandwiches and coffee delivered to all watch stations. Men eat mechanically, fuel for bodies that are running on adrenaline and caffeine. The cook reports that fresh water consumption has been higher than planned. If the pursuit extends beyond 16 hours, they may need to reduce water rations. Harper notes this but does not act on it yet. Water is a problem for tomorrow. Today's problem is staying undetected long enough to identify the target. At hour 14 and 27 minutes, the tactical picture changes with sudden, dramatic clarity. Torres reports contact ascent. Con, sonar, Sierra 1 ascending, current depth approximately 190 feet and shoaling. Rate of ascent consistent with controlled rise to periscope depth. This is it, the moment Harper has been waiting for. If the Soviet boat is coming to periscope depth, it almost certainly intends to surface or at minimum raise a snorkel to charge batteries. Either way, it will be vulnerable, exposed, potentially photographable if Harper can position Amberjack correctly. But the opportunity comes with risk. Periscope depth means shallow water, where sound propagation is different, where the risk of visual detection is much higher, where a single mistake could expose Amberjack to counterattack. Harper moves to the periscope well, already planning the observation approach. He will bring Amberjack shallow, trailing the Soviet boat by approximately 2,000 yards, close enough for optical observation through the periscope, but far enough to avoid visual detection if the Soviet lookouts are competent. He will raise the periscope for minimum time, 30 seconds maximum, taking photographs quickly before dropping the scope and going deep to avoid counter-detection. Make your depth 80 feet, slow rise, maintain current speed. Prepare to come to periscope depth on my command. Photography team to control room with the periscope camera mounting. I want this on film before he knows we exist. The photography team consists of a second-class photographer's mate and his assistant, both carrying the bulky periscope camera adapter that allows standard 35mm film to be exposed through the periscope optics. The camera is already loaded with high-speed black and white film, the only type that will work in the low light conditions of dawn observation. The photographer checks his equipment with practiced efficiency: film advance mechanism, shutter operation, lens focus ring. Amberjack rises slowly through the water column, ascending into the zone where grey dawn light penetrates from the surface, where periscope observation becomes possible, but where the risk of detection increases exponentially. Harper grips the periscope handles, waiting for the precise moment when Amberjack will be shallow enough for observation, but the Soviet boat will not yet have lookouts topside if it surfaces. Torres calls out depth readings: 150 feet, 120 feet, 100 feet, 90 feet, 85 feet. Depth 80 feet, sir. Trim satisfactory. The diving officer's report confirms Amberjack is holding steady at periscope depth. Sonar, what's the contact doing? Contact at periscope depth, bearing steady. No significant change in acoustic signature. Estimate range 2200 yards, based on signal strength. Harper does the mental geometry. 2,200 yards. Just over a nautical mile. At that range, the periscope optics will provide clear observation, even in marginal light conditions. But it also means Amberjack is close enough that any mistake will be immediately obvious to Soviet observers. At 0647 hours, 16 hours and 5 minutes into the tracking mission, Harper gives the order. Up periscope, quick look, photograph and down, make it fast. The periscope slides upward through its well with a soft hydraulic hiss. The massive tube rises through the pressure hull, through the sail structure, breaking the surface with minimal wake. Harper rotates the optics, scanning the bearing where sonar holds the Soviet contact. For 2 seconds, he sees nothing but grey ocean and greyer sky. Then, exactly where the solution predicted, the Soviet Zulu-class submarine is surfacing, water cascading off its hull as it blows ballast tanks and rises into the cold Atlantic dawn. Through the periscope optics, In perfect morning light filtered through low clouds, Harper sees exactly what NATO intelligence has been searching for. The Zulu-class hull is unmistakable. The characteristic double-hull construction, the tall sail structure, the diving planes mounted on the sail rather than the bow. But this is not a standard attack configuration. Integrated into the sail, visible even in the low morning light, are two vertical cylindrical structures that can only be missile launch tubes. The tubes are approximately 2 meters in diameter, with hinged covers that are currently closed. The configuration matches intelligence briefings Harper received about the Zulu V variant. 6 boats converted from standard attack submarines to carry SSN-4 SARC ballistic missiles. I have visual confirmation. Zulu-class, ballistic missile variant. 2 vertical launch tubes visible in the sail structure. Start photographing. The photographer beside Harper clicks the shutter in rapid sequence, the motor drive advancing film with a quiet mechanical whir. Each frame captures a different angle as Harper slowly rotates the periscope. Hull configuration, sail modifications, launch tube doors, equipment layouts visible on the deck, antenna arrays. Every photograph is intelligence gold, visual confirmation of capability that will allow Western analysts to build complete technical assessments of Soviet ballistic missile submarine design and deployment patterns. Harper allows himself 22 seconds of observation, longer than doctrine recommends, shorter than he wants. Through the periscope, he can see Soviet sailors emerging from the forward hatch, beginning the process of rigging the boat for surface running. None of them look toward Amberjack's periscope. The sea state is working in Harper's favor. 3-foot swells that make the small periscope wake virtually invisible against the natural wave pattern. Downscope. Make your depth 200 feet. Course 280, speed 8 knots. Silent routine. We're done here. The periscope retracts smoothly. Amberjack's bowplanes angle down, and the submarine slips back into the depths. Behind them, on the surface, the Soviet submarine crew goes about their battery charging operations, completely unaware that American eyes have documented their most sensitive capability from less than 2,000 yards distance. But the mission is not yet complete. Amberjack must escape the area, reach safe waters for snorkeling, charge her own depleted batteries, and transit back to Key West with the film that will prove what they have accomplished. Harper does not allow himself the luxury of celebration. If Soviet lookouts spotted Amberjack's periscope during those 22 seconds of observation, the Soviet captain will immediately radio for assistance. Soviet Naval Aviation Patrol aircraft could be overhead within 40 minutes. Sonar, report all contacts. I need to know everything in the water within 10 miles. Torres studies his display with renewed intensity. Con, sonar, Sierra 1 on the surface, bearing changing slowly left to right as we open range. Faint diesel engine noise indicates he's running one engine to charge batteries. No other contacts on passive sonar. Ocean background normal for this area. Harper calculates rapidly. The Soviet submarine remains on the surface, suggesting the observation went undetected. But Harper cannot assume safety. He must put distance between Amberjack and the Soviet boat, while conserving enough battery power to reach snorkeling depth in international waters. Navigator, plot a course to the nearest point where we can safely snorkel. I want us in international waters, away from known Soviet patrol patterns, with sufficient ocean depth to dive deep if we're compromised. The navigation officer spreads charts across the plotting table. Sir, recommend course 295 for 42 nautical miles. That puts us west of the Reykjanes Ridge in deep water. At current speed, approximately 5 hours transit time. 5 hours. Harper looks at the battery status indicators. Current state of charge is 41%. 5 hours at 8 knots will drain approximately 25%, leaving 16% when they reach the snorkeling position. That is cutting it extremely close. Reduce speed to 6 knots. That extends our transit time but improves our battery margin. Plot a track that keeps us below the thermal layer and away from major shipping lanes. The first hour of the escape transit passes without incident. Torres maintains sonar watch, monitoring for any indication that Soviet forces are searching for them. The ocean remains quiet, except for natural background sounds. The Soviet submarine they tracked for 16 hours has faded from sonar range, still on the surface charging batteries, apparently unaware of the American boat that documented their capabilities. At hour 17 of the overall mission, Harper faces a new concern. The air quality in Amberjack has degraded noticeably. The CO2 scrubbers are working at maximum capacity, but 17 hours of 23 men breathing in a sealed tube have elevated carbon dioxide levels to the point where crew members are reporting headaches and slight dizziness. Engineering: increase ventilation fan speed to maximum. I know it creates more noise, but we need to circulate the air more effectively. We're far enough from the contact that the additional noise is acceptable. By hour 18, Amberjack crosses into international waters according to the navigation plot. This provides a degree of legal protection. If detected now by Soviet forces, Amberjack can legitimately claim to be conducting routine operations in international waters. Prepare to come to snorkeling depth, up scope for visual observation, confirm clear surface, raise the snorkel, run one diesel engine at maximum charging rate, clear the interior atmosphere, then get back down to safe depth. Total time on snorkel, maximum 30 minutes. At 08:47 hours, 18 hours, and 5 minutes after initial contact with the Soviet submarine, Harper gives the order. Make your depth 60 feet. Prepare to raise snorkel. Amberjack rises slowly toward the surface. At 60 feet, Harper raises the periscope for a careful visual sweep of the surrounding ocean. The dawn has given way to full morning, grey and overcast with low clouds. Visibility is approximately 3 miles. The sea is empty. No ships, no aircraft, no visible threats. Clear surface, raise the snorkel. The snorkel mast extends upward, breaking the surface with its distinctive twin-pipe design. The head valve opens and the diesel engine starts with a deep, rumbling roar. The engine drives the main generator at full output, pumping electrical current into the depleted batteries. The interior fills with the smell of diesel exhaust, acrid, but also the smell of power being restored. Men breathe deeply despite the fumes, grateful for the fresh air displacing the stale atmosphere. At 15 minutes on snorkel, the batteries have climbed to 58% charge. Not full, but sufficient for tactical flexibility. The interior air quality has improved dramatically. Harper makes the decision to secure snorkeling and return to safe depth. Secure snorkeling, lower snorkel mast, make your depth 200 feet. Come right to course 300. Harper retires to his cabin for the first time in 18 hours. Before sleeping, he drafts a message that will be transmitted once Amberjack reaches waters where radio communication is safe. Mission successful, primary objective achieved, positive visual identification, photographic evidence obtained. Returning to base, no compromise. Amberjack sends. That message, once transmitted, will trigger a cascade of intelligence analysis. The film will be developed in secure facilities. Photographic interpreters will examine every frame. The analysis will inform NATO strategic planning for years. If this deep dive into Cold War submarine operations inspired you, please like this video, subscribe to Cold War Chronicles, and turn on notifications. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, or if you have family who served in submarines during the Cold War. Every like and comment helps share these forgotten stories with more people who need to hear them. This is Cold War Chronicles. We preserve the memory of those who hunted in silence beneath the waves. 3 days later, Amberjack approaches Key West under brilliant Florida sunshine. The crew has cleaned the boat, secured equipment, prepared reports. Harper stands on the bridge as Amberjack makes her approach. From a distance, the boat looks like any other guppy submarine returning from routine patrol. Nothing suggests this boat has just completed one of the most successful intelligence-gathering missions of the Cold War. As Amberjack secures to the pier, Harper sees the intelligence courier team waiting. They take possession of the film within minutes. The film will be on an aircraft to Washington within the hour. That evening, Harper and his crew gather for the traditional post-patrol dinner. Steak and lobster. The conversation is subdued. Harper raises a glass. To the crew of Amberjack, to 18 hours of professional excellence, to the mission we will never be able to talk about. The photographs, will have significant impact on American intelligence assessment of Soviet ballistic missile submarine capabilities. The intelligence will inform naval force deployments throughout the 1960s, but the value extends beyond immediate intelligence gain. Amberjack's successful tracking demonstrates that Guppy-converted diesel-electric submarines retain significant capability. The mission validates the Guppy conversion program. The crew will eventually receive a Navy unit commendation, though the citation will reveal nothing specific. Harper will be promoted to captain 2 years later. USS Amberjack will continue serving until decommissioned in 1973, having served 27 years. For Commander Thomas Harper, the 18-hour hunt will be the defining moment of his career. The patience to trail a target for nearly a day without error, the judgment to know when to take risks, the technical knowledge to maximize capabilities while respecting limitations, the leadership to keep his crew focused, the courage to operate in contested waters where detection could mean death. These are the qualities that make submarine commanders successful. These are the skills that win the silent battles of the Cold War. The ocean is vast and dark and unforgiving. It has no memory of the submarines that transit its depths. But the men who fight those battles remember. They remember hours of patient stalking. They remember tension of operating on dwindling battery power. They remember satisfaction of mission success and relief of safe return. USS Amberjack's 18-hour hunt in October 1959 represents one small engagement in a conflict that spanned 4 decades. But for the 23 men who conducted that mission, the mission was anything but small. It was perfect execution of submarine warfare at the highest level of professional competence. This is Cold War Chronicles. If you found this account compelling, please subscribe and turn on notifications. Thank you for ensuring that Commander Harper, his crew, and all those who served aboard USS Amberjack are not forgotten. The photographs remain classified even today. The mission files are sealed in secure archives, but the achievement endures. USS Amberjack tracked a Soviet ballistic missile submarine for 18 hours without being detected, obtained visual confirmation and photographic documentation, and returned safely with intelligence that influenced American naval policy for years. That is the definition of mission success. That is the legacy of USS Amberjack and the men who served aboard her. That is why we remember, why we preserve these stories, why we honor those who fought the silent battles that kept the Cold War from becoming hot. In the vast darkness of the North Atlantic, in waters that have long since erased any trace of the submarines that passed through them in October 1959, the memory remains. Commander Harper, tracking a Soviet submarine with skill and patience. Petty Officer Witten, watching his sonar display without error. The crew maintaining silent discipline. The photographer capturing images that would inform strategic decisions. These are the moments that define naval history. These are the achievements worth preserving. These are the stories that must not be forgotten.